I grew up in what most people would consider a typical middle-class household. 2 parents, a younger sister, and a small suburban home. But anyone close to us would tell you that there was always tension between my parents and me because they simply favored my sister. My parents disowned me after believing my sister's false accusation. But at Grandma's Christmas dinner, one gift revealed the truth they had been hiding for years. Emma, my younger sister, and I were always the last to be considered, but that wasn't always the case. I recall that when we were children, our parents were very loving and caring to us both and showered us with affection, and it makes sense that they would be since we were a pretty intelligent pair who excelled at everything that came our way. We were enrolled in piano lessons, art classes, and gymnastics, and our parents were equally proud of us. I never experienced tension or a subtle preference for one of us over the other back then. But when I entered 6th grade, everything changed. It began with a single test, not even a very significant one. But I received a poor grade, my first ever, and it was enough for my parents to start viewing me differently. I could tell something had shifted when my mother stopped looking at me the same way she did at Emma when she brought home another perfect score. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Maybe I was being too sensitive, but it became impossible to ignore. If I made a mistake, no matter how small, it was held against me. If Emma made a mistake, it was brushed off or minimized. At the same time, their compliments started to feel obligatory, while Emma's accomplishments were celebrated with genuine pride. Suddenly, I felt like the loose thread that could come undone at any time. As we grew older, Emma developed into everything my parents had ever desired in a daughter: intelligent, popular, and outgoing. She was the class president, the homecoming queen, and the girl everyone liked. In contrast, I became more introverted, kept to myself, studied diligently, and succeeded in my own way. My father would excuse her for having a bad day, but I was always compared. Why can't you be more like Emma? Emma always got new clothes, her own car, and all the attention when she needed help with her homework. Our parents would sit with her for hours to make sure she understood every detail. If I asked for help, it was either too late in the evening or they would tell me to figure it out. However, it was never enough to compete with Emma, so I soon stopped trying. By the time we were in high school, the differences in how we were treated had become glaringly obvious. I tried to maintain a relationship with Emma despite the unequal treatment. After all, she was my sister, and I loved her, but it got harder and harder to ignore her growing sense of entitlement. They had started treating me like an adult while treating Emma like a princess. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I would have to work for it, while Emma had everything handed to her on a silver platter. The turning point came one summer after I graduated from high school, when I was accepted to a respectable college on a partial scholarship. I was thrilled to finally leave the house and start my own life. But it wasn't just my parents who adored her. Our friends, teachers, and even strangers were captivated by her charm. She was the golden girl, and I started to question whether anyone truly saw me for who I was or if I was just Emma's sister. During this time, Emma began dating Jake, the star quarterback for our high school football team. He was attractive, well-liked, and from a wealthy family. Naturally, my parents treated Jake like the son they had never had, and every weekend, Jake was over at our house. I had hoped that with some distance, my relationship with him, they would prepare lavish meals merely to please him. It was evident that they had already planned for Emma and Jake to marry, start a family, and have the ideal grandchildren. Meanwhile, I was fighting to make it through my first semester of college, working part-time to support my education. When I returned home on breaks, I was exhausted, and all I could hear about was Emma and Jake's latest outing, or how well Emma was doing in her classes. When I came home for a visit one weekend during a break from college, everything seemed normal until Emma's new bracelet, a gold charm bracelet Jake had given her, went missing. It was an expensive piece, and Emma was visibly upset. They would also ask me how I was doing, or why I couldn't find someone like Jake. I was stunned when my parents didn't hesitate to believe Emma when she suggested that I might have taken it. At first, I thought she was joking, but she was serious when she said that she had seen me admiring the bracelet the previous evening and hinted that I might have taken it out of envy. My parents refused to listen to my protests, even though I swore I hadn't taken anything. They were certain I had taken it out of resentment, and my father even said something like, "We always knew you were envious of Emma," which hurt more than anything they had ever said before. It felt like all those years of trying to be a good daughter and gain their approval had been for nothing. They gave me an ultimatum to return the bracelet or leave. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had nothing to prove my innocence, just my word. But that wasn't enough for them. They had already made up their minds. So I packed my things, left without turning around, and severed all ties with them because I had no other option, and couldn't stay in a house where I was treated like someone I wasn't. I found a friend to stay with until I could get my life back on track. I struggled without my family's support for years after that day. I had to figure everything out on my own, juggling work and school, and barely making ends meet. There were days when I thought I wouldn't make it, but I graduated, found a respectable job, and gradually began to build a life for myself. Meanwhile, I heard from mutual friends that Emma was doing well. She and Jake were still together, and she had secured a comfortable job. My father had helped her get a job at a marketing firm, and it seemed like nothing had changed for them. They were still the ideal family, minus me. 5 years went by before I heard from my family again. The only person who gave me any kind of support or encouragement was my grandma, my dad's mother, to be exact. I was shocked to receive an invitation to my grandmother's Christmas dinner. When I received the invitation, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go, but something inside me told me that I should. When I got to the dinner, it felt like I was entering a time capsule. My grandmother had always been the only family member to treat me fairly, even after everything that had happened. She would occasionally send me a birthday card or check in with a text, but she never brought up my parents or tried to push reconciliation. The tension was obvious. My parents, Emma, and even Jake were there, along with a few other family members. My parents greeted me stiffly, and Emma acted as though nothing had ever happened between us. It seemed like they expected me to put the past behind me and slip back into their ideal family dynamic. The night was awkward, but I managed to get through it. As the evening wore on, my grandmother began handing out gifts. I wasn't expecting anything special, but my heart almost stopped when I opened the box. Inside was a gold locket, an old family heirloom passed down through generations. This locket wasn't just any jewelry. Whoever inherited it was regarded as the legitimate heir to the family's assets. Grandma had inherited it from her father, and she was now giving it to me directly, ignoring her son, my father, and all of the other grandchildren, including Emma. My parents' faces went pale, and Emma, who had always been the golden child, sat in stunned silence. My parents quickly tried to cover their shock with forced smiles, but I could feel the tension in the room. According to tradition, everything my grandparents owned, their house, their land, and their savings, would now go to me. The rest of the dinner was awkward, and shortly after, my parents pulled me aside. They suddenly apologized, as though all the years of mistreatment could be undone with a few kind words. They mentioned that Emma might soon be getting married and that they wanted me to rejoin the family for her sake. But I knew this wasn't about love or reconciliation. It was about legacy. The heirloom had always meant something in our family, and now that I had it, they knew I would inherit everything attached to it. My father even said, in a tone that felt more like a warning than an offer, that they were willing to forgive me and start over. It was as if they had forgotten who had been wronged in the first place. Other relatives also urged me to be reasonable, clearly worried about what they might lose instead of caring about reconnecting genuinely. I knew what I should do, but all the pressure made me second-guess myself. Did I really want to be part of this family again, knowing they only valued me because of what I now possessed? Could I forgive them knowing that? I could almost hear the cliches forming. Sharing is caring. Blood is thicker than water. You don't want to be alone now. But deep down, I knew their sudden interest in me was self-serving. After the Christmas party, I returned to my apartment feeling overwhelmed. I tried to spend the rest of the evening avoiding my parents and other family members, but they persisted. My parents looked at me with regret. Emma wouldn't stop smiling as if we were best friends again. But I knew their intentions had little to do with me as a person and more to do with the legacy tied to that heirloom. Over the following days, I spent a lot of time reflecting. I decided I needed to speak with Grandma properly. The heirloom wasn't just symbolic. It meant I would inherit the family's assets. I hadn't sought this, but now that it was in my lap, I needed clarity. When I met with my grandmother, I thanked her for entrusting me with the heirloom before asking her directly what it meant. I explained that I wasn't after wealth, and didn't want to get caught up in family drama without understanding what it all involved. Grandma listened patiently and then told me something I hadn't expected. She had watched everything unfold for years and had seen how the family had grown distant, especially after my falling out with my parents. She knew the family dynamics had become unhealthy and acknowledged that I had been unfairly treated, particularly by Emma and my parents. She said she hadn't gotten involved earlier because she believed people should live their own lives. But when she saw how I had been cast aside yet still managed to build something for myself, she knew I was the one who deserved her trust. She had already written a will with my name on it. It wasn't just about a locket anymore. It was about recognizing character. Grandma thought I would take care of everything, and that responsibility felt significant and weighty. She reassured me that this wasn't about rewarding me for what I had gone through, but about entrusting the family's future to people she knew would do it right. Although it felt odd to be in this position all of a sudden, I couldn't help but feel validated because Grandma had finally seen the truth, which meant more than anything. However, even though this made a lot of things clearer, it also made things more complicated because the inheritance was still a point of contention. And I knew that Emma and my parents would do everything in their power to get back in, but now that they understood the stakes, they weren't going to let it go easily. Hello, Reddit users, I'm back with an update. If you've been following along, you know that my family situation is a mess, but I thought that returning to school would bring me some peace. I was mistaken though, because a lot has happened, and I really need to vent about it before I lose my mind. Following the Christmas catastrophe, in which my parents and Emma essentially pleaded for the family's inheritance, I went back to my apartment in the hopes of escaping the chaos for a few days. I was able to engross myself in work in an attempt to block out the persistent calls and texts from my family, but naturally, that strategy didn't last long because the messages continued, not only from my parents and Emma, but also from my extended family. Family is everything. Don't let money tear you apart. And my favorite, you're being selfish. What made it worse was that these relatives, who hadn't spoken to me in years, felt compelled to mediate the situation. They were all repeating the same lines. Family is everything. They weren't present when my parents cut ties with me or when I had to scrape together money for food and rent while attending college, while Emma was living her ideal life with everything handed to her. I felt like my parents were overwhelming me with their opinions, so I decided to ignore it all and concentrate on my work. However, one afternoon, completely out of the blue, my parents and Emma showed up at my apartment. Yes, you read that right. They came to my house without my permission, and it seemed like they were on a mission to pressure me into making amends on their terms. Of course, they were knocking loudly on my door and calling my name, and I could hear my mother crying from the hallway. I froze, and my friend, who had been living with me for a few months, looked scared, and I was at a loss for what to do. When I opened the door, my parents began pleading with me directly in front of my friend. Emma stood there with her overly concerned expression, but I could see right through it that she was more concerned with what would happen if I didn't agree to share the inheritance than she was with genuinely repairing our relationship. Emma was crying, saying that they couldn't lose me and that we needed to make things right. My dad kept saying that they were willing to forgive me for everything, as if I had done something wrong. It wasn't the right time or place for this conversation, but they weren't paying attention. My dad was standing in the doorway, refusing to leave, and my mom practically shoved past me in an attempt to enter the apartment. They kept talking over me, saying that Emma would soon get married and that the family needed to be whole again before that happened. They made it seem like I was the one causing division while trying to make me agree to give up something. The entire situation was humiliating, and my neighbors began to emerge from their rooms to watch the chaos unfold. I tried to handle it quietly, but the longer they stayed, the louder they got. My mom was on her knees pleading with me to forgive them, and Emma stood there looking confident, as if she knew they would eventually wear me down. I was stuck, and I didn't know what to do. After what seemed like hours of pleading, I finally couldn't stand it any longer, so I called security, who fortunately showed up right away. They were courteous at first, asking my parents to leave, but when they refused, security had to be firm and threatened to call the authorities if they didn't leave. It was extremely embarrassing, but my parents eventually gave in. Before Emma took it a step further, she sent a mass text to a number of my friends after I left, telling them that I had abandoned her and my parents. She made it seem like I was the one at fault in all of this, omitting the part where they had cut me off for something I didn't even do. Some of my friends were understandably confused, so I had to explain that I was distancing myself from my family in front of everyone. I'm not sure what to do because I've not spoken to my parents since that incident, and I'm trying to move on, but their desperation has me constantly looking over my shoulder. I feel like I'm being forced into a corner where I'm expected to give in just to make everyone else happy, but I can't forget how they treated me at the same time. Reddit users, buckle up. Because since my last post following the apartment incident where my parents and Emma appeared, things have gotten even worse. I want to concentrate on myself and my future, but it feels like my family is determined to drag me back into their issues. The pressure is so much that I'm wondering if it will ever stop, or if I'll have to deal with this for the rest of my life. First of all, Emma's little stunt of texting my friends put everyone in a really awkward situation. I had to explain the entire family situation from the beginning, which was really exhausting. What was even more strange was how Emma had obtained my friends' numbers in the first place. None of them had given it to her, so I was just as perplexed as they were. Emma's message portrayed me as an uncaring person who had turned my back on my family. Fortunately, after I revealed the truth and showed them the pattern of manipulation, they understood, but it was still embarrassing to have to share so much personal information just to clear my name. To put it mildly, my friends were supportive, but they were also understandably unsettled and didn't know what to believe at first. I thought I could finally relax when my grandmother stepped in. Apparently, she had heard about the apartment incident and was upset about how things had gotten out of hand. Rather than confronting my parents directly, Grandma chose to deal with the relatives who had been speaking negatively about me without my consent. She met with a number of my cousins, uncles, and aunts to correct the record. Grandma has always been the calm but firm type, and she handled it in her typical quiet but effective manner. It turns out that my parents had given them a totally different account of what happened, and they had reportedly told them that the reason they cut me off was because they had discovered the gold bracelet Emma claimed I had taken in my drawer. They claimed that this was when they realized I was no longer trustworthy and ended the relationship with me. When Grandma told me this, I was shocked because I had never heard of it before. Grandma was equally shocked when she discovered that there was no bracelet in my drawer. In fact, I had never even seen the bracelet in question, and that the entire situation was fabricated. She had assumed that my parents had good reason to treat me the way they did, but hearing this falsehood completely changed her perspective, and she didn't hold back when she confronted the other members of the family, telling them how they had been making unfair accusations about me without even knowing the truth. My relatives were shocked to learn that Emma had misled them and that my parents had supported her without even giving me a chance to defend myself. Once the truth was revealed, I began to hear things from various family members that I had not previously known, indicating that my parents had been concealing much more than their favoritism for Emma. One of my uncles said the biggest surprise was about Emma and Jake. I hadn't heard much about their relationship recently, but it seemed to be going poorly. My dad had taken out a second mortgage on the house to fund some of Emma's extravagant wedding plans, which put a tremendous financial strain on them. Another cousin revealed that Emma had been extremely difficult during wedding preparations, reacting emotionally whenever things weren't perfect. I was initially shocked when Jake left Emma, but as I learned more, it made more sense. According to my relatives, Jake had grown weary of Emma's unreasonably high expectations and constant frustrations. She had been treating him dismissively. However, there was more to it than that. Jake had begun to understand that the promises of family wealth wouldn't come to pass as quickly as he had assumed they would. As the news spread like wildfire throughout the family, I couldn't help but feel a range of emotions. Part of me felt sorry for Emma despite everything she had done, but another part of me felt validated because I had been made to feel like the outsider for so long. Financially, however, things were much more complicated after the drama surrounding the heirloom and inheritance. He saw the writing on the wall and decided to leave before getting deeper. In the midst of all this chaos, Emma's relatives, the same ones who had been so quick to judge me based on my parents' statements, began to reach out and apologize for the harsh remarks and judgments they had made when they thought I had done something wrong. It seemed like everything they had tried to hide was falling apart in front of them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. It was odd to witness their abrupt change of heart after the truth came to light. They kept asking for my forgiveness, claiming that they only wanted what was best for the family. But after everything, I wasn't sure I wanted to be around them anymore. I couldn't help but wonder if it was that easy for them to turn on me based only on a story, and if my parents could have done it so easily, what would have stopped them from doing it again? I felt like I would always have to be on guard around them, wondering if their loyalty to me was sincere or just convenient for the moment. After all of this, I preferred to take a break from them all and focus on myself, letting them handle their own issues without dragging me back into it. They had previously switched their opinions, siding with Emma and cutting me off. What assurance did I have that they wouldn't do the same thing if another situation came up? My parents also contacted me again, but this time their tone was different. They weren't demanding or trying to guilt me. They were almost apologetic. But I could tell that they were still focused on the money and hoped to make things go more smoothly so they could benefit from the future inheritance. They weren't concerned with actually repairing our relationship. Instead, they were concerned with maintaining appearances and securing financial stability, especially now that Emma's future wasn't looking as secure as they had hoped. so I haven't responded to them, and to be honest, I'm not sure I will. This whole experience has been a harsh reminder of how complicated and damaging my family can be, and I'm not ready to open that door again, even if they come bearing an apology. From now, Reddit, I'm concentrating on myself and the future I want to build on my own terms, without the burden of their manipulation and dishonesty hanging over me. It's been a difficult journey, but I feel like I'm finally beginning to see things more clearly.